Hello and welcome to another video tutorial on how to use C++. Today I'll show you some functions, and for this we are opening a new project and naming it number 4 functions. OK, and then next we want to start with an empty project as usual, and then add a new element here, and the name should be main. So just type in main here, add. So now we can enter our code here. Now we have to type in our frame as usual, so our basic elements like the include of the IO stream, and also we are using the standard namespace, so we have to enter this as well. And now we type in the main function, so int main with curly brackets, and this function has a return value which we indicate by entering return 0. And according to our main function, we can already see the elements of a function. So here we have the head of the function and here the body of the function. And in the head we have our return value, which is an integer. Then we have the name of the function, which here is main. And in the round brackets we could also assign some parameters. Okay, let's start with a simple example. We want to output hello world with the cout function, just like in the first video. So we type in cout hello world end line, and if we now run this, then as expected we have hello world in our console. Now the goal of this video is to convert this block of instructions, which is the cout function, into a function. And to do this we have to define the function outside of this main structure. So in here we type in void, which means the return value now is not a specific return value, you don't get anything, and then the name of the function, so hello world, and then round brackets for parameters we might want to return or to give. So this is the head of the function, and now the body is just in curly brackets, and this is really easy. We just type in the cout, and this can be taken from the main function here. So this is all we have to enter here, and then this is our body of the function. So let's comment this also with body of the function. And maybe more in detail, so the head of the function consists of the return value, the name of the function, and parameters, or let's say a parameter list we could enter in the round brackets. So now I'll show you how to call a function. For this we just type in the name of the function, and you see that it's the autofill already proposes the hello world function, and don't forget the brackets and the semicolon. And now if we run this with F5, then the hello world is in the output. The advantage is that we can outsource functions from the main function, so the source code will be clearer. And also sometimes you have to repeat functions over and over again. Then it is helpful to use the self-defined functions so that it gets shorter. So for example, we can type in hello world twice here, and then you see that the output has 2 hello worlds. Okay, the next thing is I want to show you how to create a function with a return value. So for this I'll hide this first, our first function, and delete this in the main function. And instead of typing in void, which explicitly means no return value, I'll type in int as an integer return value. So let's get it here, int, and the function's name is getInt with round brackets. And then first we define a new variable named I, integer I, and set this to 0 at first. And then in the second step we have the cin command, which is the opposite of cout, so we have an input here, and you also have to reverse the brackets, and then the input is I. So the user changes the value of the predefined I to whatever he types in. So and now we have to set the return value I. So this is what the function gives back. And now we can apply this to our main function, so we just type in the name of the function again, getInt with the brackets, but this alone won't work because we have an integer which we first have to define. So we do this in the line above, so integer named a, and then a equals the function getInt. To see that this works, we can now add a cout command and then return the value a in the output. And then you see the console offers an input, and then we type in, for example, 6. And if we press enter, then the output is also 6. So this is just what we wanted. We cannot give I in the output. I can show you this, and because if you try to run this, this will result in an error because I is only a local variable in the function above. So you see here there's the error that I is not declared because I is only local in this section. So I'll add this also as a comment. Then this means that I will only work in this block of instructions and not here. So that's why we declared a second variable a to output a here. So, and then it works again. You see this. If I type in 1000, then it will return 1000. So I'll comment this out for now. And the next function I'm going to show you is one where we want to assign some parameters to. So I'll create a new function named int add, and then we assign parameters integer a and integer b. And what we do with those is that we want to add the two, so the return value is just a plus b. And now we go to the main function, and here we can simply recall the function add and assign parameters 3 and 4. But if we run this, then you still see nothing because we did not define a variable for the return value here. So we have to do this first. So let's create a variable named sum, integer sum, and let this be the value that is the answer of the function. So sum, and then of course we have to output our sum to see a result. If we run this now, then we see the 7 as a result of the sum of 3 and 4. We could also shorten this a bit by just deleting this part with the sum and stuff, instead just typing in add 3 and 4 inside of the cout function. So let's hide the comments and run this part. So here we also see 7 as the answer. We can also change 3 to a 5 and see what the result is. Of course 9. And this is an example for a function with parameters. So let's comment this out again and go to the next one. I want to show you another example for a function, and this function should be called increment. So increment means that we want to increase the number by a certain amount every time we type it in. So let's start. We don't have a return value here, so we just type in void and then the name of the function, which is increment. And of course also here we have to assign a value. So let's say integer x. And now this means that the function should increase this value integer x. And then in the body of the function we can just type in x++. So it will be increased by 1. Now in the main function we have to define a new variable called a. Let's set it to 125 and we can output this to see if something happens before. And then we apply the function increment of our variable a and then check what happens by outputting a again. Now let's see what happens. So the output says 125 twice, but originally we wanted to increment this. Well, this is correct nevertheless, because we have here our a and we give it to the function increment here, and then it will be increased. But as before, this x is only a local variable and only valid in this block of instructions, so we don't get it back. And this is often the case in programming because you want to change a variable in another function, but the problem is to get the variable back. So like this, the function increment will not work. Instead, we have to use references, because with references we can manipulate variables. References are quite easy to create. We can just look at it with the help of the variable integer a here in this line. So a variable has a memory address because it is somewhere saved, stored in the memory. And if we want to display this memory address, we can simply type in an ampersand, an and symbol in front of the a. So like this in here. And if we execute this program now, then you see first we have the normal variable 125, and then we have this little cryptical memory address which corresponds to the and a, so this line. And with this address operator, how it is called, we can now manipulate our variable in the other function. So if we just include it here, then we can change the x variable because we're not working with a local variable, but instead we are working with the address operator. Okay, so long story short, we can just comment this line out and instead of just writing a here, we are now writing and a, so with the ampersand in front. And now if we run this, then we see that the variable indeed has been incremented from 125 to 126. And this is due to the fact that we applied a variable as reference here. So this way we can manipulate our variable at the certain memory address. Okay, so in the next example, I want to show you a recursive function. To do this, we first hide this as before, so comment this out and hide, and now we have space for the new function. Okay, so the function should calculate the factorial of a number. So the factorial, the notation would be n with an exclamation mark, would then calculate the product from the numbers below. So for example, if we say the factorial of 3, then we have 3 times 2 times 1, and then the result would be 6. Okay, so the name of the function is factorial loop, and we assign a parameter integer a. The return value is also an integer. First we have to define a result variable. We just set it to 1. And then we have to create a loop. So for as long as I, so the integer, new integer I is equal to, and as long as it is smaller than the input number n, then increase I by 1, so I++. And then inside of the loop we are multiplying the result with I. So just typing in is equal times I. And then in our main function we can call the function factorial loop with the variable or value, which can be 5 for example, and this should be in the output, so we are typing in the cout command. And now if we run this, then we get the error first. Here needs to be a return value, so, and the return value is the result. Okay, so run this again, and the output is 120. So now see how it looks like in the debugging mode. So for this we just set a breakpoint here in this line by right-clicking on it and setting a breakpoint, insert it, and then if we press F5 and run this, then it stops right there, and we can now look at it step by step. So in the console there's still nothing, and if we go to the next line, it should be that it should jump into the factorial loop function. So let's see. Okay, so now we have n5, and it is already in the factorial loop. Right now result is a cryptical number, but it should be set to 1 just now. And then we have our I, and see how the I changes, or how the result changes. Okay, so at first I is 2 and the result is 1, and then if we multiply it by 2, then the result goes to 2, and then the next step the I is 3, and if we multiply it with the result from before we get 6, and in the next step then I is 4 and the result turns into 24, and then as long as I is smaller than our n, so in the next step it is 5, we get the result 120, and now it should stop, so jump out of the loop. And this is what he does, and then here the output is created. And as you have seen, this is a possibility to calculate the factorial of a number, but as I mentioned before, we can also set this as a recursive function. And recursive means that a function can call itself. And for this we create a new function called factorial, and we again assign the value integer n. And the body here looks a little bit different than in the factorial loop. So because first of all we have an if condition which says if n equals 0, then the return value, the result, is 1. And this is just a mathematical definition that the factorial of 0 is 1. But we have to add this in curly brackets. Okay, so this is for n equals 0. And now we have the recursion which comes here. So again, recursion means that a function recalls itself. This means here, if we now want to use this recursion, we can type in that the return value is n times the factorial, so the same function, of now not n, but we now type in n minus 1. So, and then in the main function we can change our used function to factorial instead of factorial loop and see what happens. I'll keep the breakpoint to see what happens, and again he jumps right to this line where I set the breakpoint, and the next step is that the program goes into the function factorial. So like this, n is 5 still, and if we go on, then the if condition is false, so he jumps over it and goes to the line of the return value. And he sees that the factorial is used again, so the function has to be recalled again. So now n is 4, and it is again gone through the function. And if you see the calling list here, then you see that a lot of returns are summing up. So we have another one and another one, and we keep going through the function until n equals 0, because then we get the return value 1, and for the first time numbers are included into the calculation. So let's see. Now the first return value is 1, and he then just goes through the calling list of returns. So then we have 2, then we have 6, then 24 as a return value, and finally 120. And this is the number which we see then in the output. Okay, so this was an example for a recursive function. I hope that it is clear what a function is and what the advantage of a function is, and also how a function looks like, so that it has a return value here, a name, and a list of parameters in the brackets here, and that you can assign parameters with a value or as a reference to manipulate it, so as we've seen in the one example. And also I showed you a recursive function and a loop function with a calculation of the factorial. So that's it for today. Thank you for the attention and see you next time.